In entrepreneurship, you must always keep in mind that you've built something, you've got the skill, you've reached a certain scale, for some reason it's not working. Don't get so attached to it. You must be able to pull back and say that now, is there an opportunity for me to pivot? Leverage what I've built and do something else very, very quickly. You know what a lot of founders do? There's so much attachment that they keep saying, let me do it, let me try. We were in the game about a year and a half late. When quick commerce suddenly came, I was sitting in the boardroom and I was in complete denial of this business ever working. Quick commerce was a business which is very difficult to make money. The problem is that it's difficult to make money even at scale. And the single biggest reason is
BigBasket is also part of Tata Group. Are there big changes happening because of AI in how we do business, how we look at customers, how we interact with customers?
actually for us,
If you had an option to go back in time and tell yourself, do this thing differently, what are the top one or two things?
see, there are three things that I tell people that you should look for. One is clearly the ecosystem, and it can. Second is, and third is,
Whenever I watch some of these, great matches, be it cricket, tennis, I've recently started watching F1. I can't, help myself comparing that, the top athletes sort of operate with a mindset which is, it sort of transcends the sports, right? So in your experience, and you've seen sports very closely, you're also music fans, you've seen, for you to become great at anything, and I think building something is also trying to be great at something, right? Do you see some parallels between, top athletes, top sports folks, and let's say the best founders, the best folks inside startup ecosystem? What sort of mindset, what sort of training, mental training should people be doing these days?
yeah, it's absolutely. It's a great question actually. It's so much from wanting to become a sportsman to wanting to become an entrepreneur, right? It's very, very similar traits, right? One is, of course, standard simple stuff, right? It's passion for what you want to do. So, and without which you would never succeed in a sport, right? Unless you're really, really passionate about it. Second is, and that's the thing that, I wanted to ask Ankit when he was telling me about, what was happening there, is that while you're being trained or taught to become an entrepreneur or taught to work in a startup, one of the biggest things that you have to tell yourself is that I've got to deal with risk. Joining a startup is like, while it's a very fancy thing to do today, your parents will keep on forcing the fact that, it is very risky, so why don't you go and join Unilever? Or why don't you go and join Procter & Gamble? I'm using FMCG names in the absence of, because I deal with them every day. And keep pushing you. So all along, you're like telling yourself, how am I going to balance risk versus, doing something else? And that's exactly in sport, right? When you get into something, today it's even worse, right? You don't know whether you're going to make it, and you don't want to remain at a league level, and you don't want to remain at a club level, right? You want to go and play for India, and you want to play for at least Ranji, or play for the state, or play for your college, right? And all of it is very competitive. So will you make it, won't you make it, is a risk that you have to live with, play with, and with passion around you and your ability to manage that risk, I think you'll do it. And to me, these are two traits. Everything else is like, to me, knowledge, understanding about the industry and business, all that you can pick up and learn. It's all about passion, and it's all about managing risk of failure. Because if you don't make it in sport and don't get to that level, you've also lost education. Many a times you can't continue studying. Fortunately, today there are colleges that allow you to do it. There are colleges that promote sports, that you can join them, and you don't have to go to class. You can go and give an exam and study a little before that, but they will help you. But the thing is, if you don't make it, you've lost a degree, or you lost a stamp within you. So you need to be able to manage that very, very effectively, right? You can't keep getting buckled down by risk. And so all your passion goes away, and it's not. They are very similar. So if you're a good sportsman and you're driving towards becoming a good sportsman, I think you'll become a good entrepreneur.
I think one small thing I'll add there, which I have personally realized in the last 18 months, is one is managing the risk of failure, but I think one is also managing the failure itself. I was listening to Roger Federer's speech recently, and he said that, and I think Michael Jordan has said the same thing, that I have missed more shots than the shots I have made, right? Even Roger, Federer said that if you look at my shot level win percentage, is not 90%, but I have won more than 95% of the games, but at a shot level, I don't win 90%. I win only 50% or 51%, just like, so every other shot I'm losing. So even for somebody that great, they are continuously failing. And it's important to keep doing what you're doing with that mindset that there's not just risk of failure. There are micro failures that are there almost built into your daily grind, into your daily work, and you have to bounce back and look at the new shot as a new shot. And okay, I lost the last shot, but this is a new shot, let me win it. Let me try to win it. And I think just doing that again and again and again, I think this is something which I have personally been trying to learn. And I think, like, for example, Sanju Samson, right? Like, he came out, I'm sure he has seen his share of failures. He has seen his shares of setbacks. But, now he has come back again very strong. And, and people go, Abhishek Sharma didn't perform at all. So I think, but does that mean that he's not a great sports person? Maybe not, right? It's because maybe he's going through a bad phase. So I think that mentality also, I feel, I've started to appreciate that a lot more as an early founder, I feel.
Very interesting, actually. But I'll just spend a minute more on on this. That's one small difference that entrepreneurship you need to keep in mind, right? And you don't have that option in sport, right? And let me explain this. Sportsmen now, when they get into something and they start seeing some early wins and stuff like that, they haven't succeeded yet, but they're like, you tend to become extremely passionate about what you're doing, which is good, right? You need that. You can't. The issue is that if you start seeing, I don't call it failure, but if you don't start moving as fast or as quickly as you wanted to, right? You need to figure how you're going to pivot, and this is a very, it's, to me, I have personal examples of this, right? And it's something that I so strongly believe in. Entrepreneurs get very attached to what they're doing, right? Which is fantastic. You have to get attached to what you're doing. You have to be passionate. Standard stuff, right? The thing is that at some point you'll find that for whatever reasons, right? Market is not opening up, market is not ready, and it could be issues that it's not because of you, right? A sportsman, you're not doing well, it's not you. It's just that there are 100 people vying for that one opener, right? And you could be as good as the guy who got it, right? Or maybe better. Sometimes that's politics, and there's all kinds of things happen, right? In entrepreneurship, right, you must always keep in mind that you've built something, you've got the skill, you've reached a certain scale, for some reason it's not working. Don't get so attached to it. You must be able to pull back, right, from the attachment and say that now, is there an opportunity for me to pivot, leverage what I've built, and do something else very, very quickly. You know what a lot of founders do? There's so much attachment that they keep saying, let me do it, let me try. Ankit, I must give them this example of mine, right? And it's an example that's so dear to me, and I'll again spend a little time. My first startup was a company called Fabmart, 1999. I had a company called Fabmart. Fabmart was the first horizontal portal in India. There was only one more other than that. It was a company called Rediff. And Rediff was largely a news site. And so they just went, said, let's give you something more than news, and they set up a little portal of selling various things. Fabmart was selling music, was selling books, was selling a whole lot of stuff in 1999.
Was it like Amazon of India at the point?
Exactly. So it was exactly an Amazon of India, and we set it up, got funding. Reliance came and gave us the first money. Chris Capital came and gave us money. The problem then was that there was no ecosystem to build an online system, right? Would you believe that there was no payment gateway available? How can you do an online business without a payment gateway? But we were all very, very courageous, and told ourselves we should. So we used to take card numbers on phone, and also the CVV number on phone, right? And authorize the payment. And this was Fabmart, which started in 99, ran with great difficulty till about 2003, 2004. And we realized that this is becoming a problem, because next day there was a front page article saying, if you shop online, you lose all your money in the bank, because you've kind of given your CVV number, and so there is no payment gateway. There were no logistics partners. There was nothing that could enable an online system then. So ecosystem wasn't ready, right? So, and we were brave enough at that time, 2001 or 2000 also, to start grocery online, right? And grocery is the most difficult business, most complex, supply chain and most complex business to start. But we said, let's start grocery also. So we had set up a few warehouses. Grocery, if you all know that it has to be inventory based. You can't run it on a marketplace. It's not possible, right? So we set up warehouses and all that. And then 3 founders, we were on a flight back from Pune, and we were telling ourselves, like, guys, this is not working, right? The 2 of them, right? Because the business wasn't just happening, right? It was just not growing, just not scaling. Consumers were actually running away because there wasn't an ecosystem, right? And that was Fabmart. And so 2 of them saying, listen, we getting very dispassionate and saying, like, listen, we built these warehouses, let's start doing something else. So I said, what? So we said, let's start creating a physical store, grocery store network, leveraging what you have, because the online business is not going anywhere. And here is this me who's sitting there, the attached entrepreneur, saying, how can you think of doing this? And how can you think of stopping something? Let's give it a shot. Let's give it a shot. Let's give it a shot. Exactly what Ankit was saying. You want to keep trying? But what was clear then is that you can keep trying, but the market is not going to change unless basics of that ecosystem start evolving and coming, right? So 2 of them actually saying, let's pivot, right? Let's start online, let's start a physical grocery chain. And I was saying no to the extent that, we are mid-flight, and I wanted to open the door and tell them, like, listen, you guys are being crazy, right? Took so much of effort, 2-3 years of so much of time has gone into it, so much of money has gone into it, investors, blah, blah, blah. A democratic country, 2 versus 1, so I lost that battle, right? And we came back, pivoted into a physical grocery chain called Fab Mall, merged into a company in Andhra Pradesh called Trinetra, became a 150 store network, and in 2005 sold that business to the Aditya Birla Group, which is called More. And just imagine if the 2 of them listened to me, right? We would have, that business, eventually that online business tanked, and it became India Plaza, and somewhere down the line shut. And the physical business really scaled, sold it, all cash deal.
This was back in 2004.
Yeah, 2005. And that's what you see as More today.
I'm sure you would have sent, like, thank you cards to your founders, co-founders.
No, there's the same founders doing BigBasket. So, I mean, the point I was trying to make is that, you get very attached to the business. You need to pull back at times when you find the business not working or scaling. Pivot, right? Leverage what you built and see whether you can do different things, which you can't do in sport. If I'm a good cricketer, I can't suddenly overnight become a good tennis player.
No, I think, but like this is actually quite important, like quite an interesting story. But like going back to when you started Fabmart, right? Like even today, a lot of students here, a lot of founders outside are taking bold bets on what will happen, and as a result, let's start something today which may not look possible today. So what sort of gave you the confidence that Amazon of India can be built so early, even before there was internet, there was payment gateway, logistics?
See, it's just like what each one of you are wanting to do, right? Everything we saw there is something that tells you that here is a concept, here is a new energy drink, or here is a new snack that will work, right? So you research it, of course, you study and understand markets, and you plunge into it. Our story was very, very different at that point in time. We were really not thinking it's, it happened very accidentally. I was working in a company called PlanetAsia.com, and which was actually part of the Microland group, and which was the first internet services company. That's the first time I saw an email ID, which is in 1997. And so we were building websites for companies, right? So Citibank wanted to build the first payment gateway for India. It was a product called Suvidha, the first debit card, long back. All of this you won't know. So we went to pitch for it. And we went to pitch for it. The Citibank guy said, there's somebody who's got to use the payment gateway, right? So we need a commerce platform. So they said they'll build the commerce platform. So they'll have built commerce. We were pitching for the payment gateway because we were also a internet service provider, building products, building stuff for companies. And so all that happened, and so third meeting, fourth meeting, we again go back, Prestige Meridian MG Road, right? So we went up the lift, and this guy tells us, hey, listen, you know what? I've just been reminded by my folks in the US that, listen, I'm a bank, and I can't be sitting and building e-commerce sites. So I can only build the gateway. And here is this, two of us sitting there, looked at each other and told ourselves that is there an opportunity for us to do something? He was my boss in Planet Asia. He was the CEO, I was the COO. We went down the lift, we looked at each other, spoke to each other for some time, went back on the lift and told him that we will build that e-commerce site. And that's how it actually happened, very accidental. But in those days, I come from a family, we all came from families which have never seen businesses. So we had to go convince family, all that stuff happened. So that's how very accidental. And so at that point in time, all we were seeing is Rediff.com starting to build something, and we thought there's an opportunity because Amazon was obviously
big,
scaling.
Yeah.
But
and
what
I think
we didn't,
they just listed also.
And not in India, I mean
right.
outside. And what we didn't see was the ecosystem. There was somebody who's building the first payment gateway, which would have taken 2 years to build, and we're trying to build something in the commerce space, and we thought customers would be okay by giving us their card numbers, and foolish.
But I think since in the last 10, 12 years, the ecosystem has moved very fast.
Yeah.
With UPI, with internet banking, with AI now, like launching things are very, 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 very fast. But
we started in 2011, so I think, of course, compared to 99, a lot of things were actually ready, and actually we had seen Flipkart, which started in 2006.
Right.
By the time they were at 2011, they had scaled, right? And while they were largely books, they had really scaled, and there were consumers really looking at it. Banks had set up their own their payment gateways. We had mobile phones. We had, iPads were just coming in, at that point in time. So, kind of ready.
And sir, with AI coming in, what are the biggest changes that are happening inside BigBasket? I mean, BigBasket is also part of now a larger group, Tata Group. So, are there big changes happening because of AI in how we do business, how we look at customers, how we interact with customers?
Big changes happening. Yeah. So AI is really changing a lot of. Actually, for us, it is more from an efficiency standpoint rather than a consumer-facing standpoint. Consumer-facing standpoint, we are doing stuff around personalization and stuff like that, which we're always doing. AI has just come and made it a little more easier and better. But on the supply chain side, which is, like I said, very, very complex. Grocery is a very complex business, right? 20% of my business is perishables, right? And perishables is 1 day shelf life, right? And so we manage it like what's called the newsstand model, right? The newsstand model, you've seen a newspaper? Newspaper life is 1 day, right? That's the same thing that you have. So your efficiencies have to be so good, otherwise you lose a lot of money in that business. So there's AI helping us a lot. Technology, of course, whole lot of coding, whole lot of our ability to predict what we need to buy, more on the supply side, has got far, far superior now. So we use AI a lot. We're a little mindful, careful. I think it will take a little more time for it to kind of evolve and get a little better. But I think it's changing a lot of things internally.
How has BigBasket team reacted, or sort of maybe reacted is the right word, both internally and externally, to the competition of quick commerce? Because I think quick commerce is here, right? I mean, at least for the top 20 million households, it has become the new norm. Where do we see BigBasket going from here? How do we, figure out a way to coexist with quick commerce?
BigBasket is now quick commerce, right? We've completely pivoted a year and a half back, and we were in the game about a year and a half late. When quick commerce suddenly came, I was sitting in, that time we were already part of Tata's, and we were sitting in the boardroom, and I was in complete denial of this business ever working, right? And this is what happens to somebody who's already in the business, right? And when you're in the business and doing really well and scaled a business to $1 billion, $1.5 billion, business which is large, right? Anything new that you start seeing, you either have to adopt it or pass, right? So we had many things that came. Great example is the same Grofers, which is now BlinkIt. Good friends of mine. In 2014, they came with a model which was basically saying we will now take on BigBasket because we will become asset light, and so we will do buying from kiranas, right, and selling. Didn't work, right? And so you had to pass many such businesses. Then there was something called social commerce, where people said, can I get people to buy together, right? Didn't work, we passed it. But we didn't pass milk, for example. We are quite large and heavy into the milk subscription business. We have a product called BB Daily, right? Which people can subscribe and buy milk every morning. But we didn't pass that, we took that in. So quick commerce was, and I don't think that has changed largely as far as I am concerned, or we are concerned, and the industry is concerned, that it's also a business which is very difficult to make money, right? And why would you do a business which is difficult to make money? People will figure. The problem is that it's difficult to make money even at scale, right? And the single biggest reason is that average order values have dropped to 1/4 of what they were. And the single biggest driver of unit economics in grocery is average order value. What was $1,200 has dropped to $400, $450, $500. BigBasket runs at $600 because we are traditionally in the business and we are large. All said and done, there was denial, so we waited a year and a half, but consumers adopted it with such craze that the business just started growing and scaling that it didn't leave us with any choice. And this is what happens when you build good brands. The brands stay, so even if you are late, right, it doesn't matter. The brand recall is very high. There are still people till about a year and a half back, after having pivoted, people thought we are still in the slotted business. It took us a little time to kind of tell people that we are also QC, and that work still goes on, and we are now it's a full-fledged QC company that's growing, scaling fast, and I think probably will become profitable faster than industry.
Because all the scale and all the efficiency.
One is scale, second is efficiencies, right?
Yeah.
And for us, we drive 20% of perishables, which drives the highest gross margin. Everybody else is at 5% because they sell more snacks. They sell more because there's a young generation that's largely there. Our customer base is the old customer base that actually buys grocery the way they were buying grocery, except that now they buy it 5 times a month instead of once a month or twice a month. So frequency has gone up, but average order value is still $600, which is very healthy in the QC business. So it'll work.
Are there other things you would change going back in time? Let's say if you were to, if you had an option to go back in time and tell yourself that do this thing differently, what are the top 1 or 2 things you would also?
The only one the biggest learning of mine has been that whole thing about starting a company without having an ecosystem around it. And I'm telling you, lots of money went into it also. So it wasn't a very easy. So there are 3 things that I tell people that you should look for, right? When you want to start something. One is clearly the ecosystem, and it can kill you, right? An ecosystem comes, and you'll assure yourself by doing a lot of market study. Be sure of the product market fit and research it well before you jump in, but do it fast because nowadays you have lesser time actually to wait, right? Second is raise capital, right? And raise capital early. I think we've done this better this time. I think don't optimize for valuations. Entrepreneurs tend to believe that I should hold higher stake in the company and hence start raising lesser money. Raising money is the most difficult thing in life. Most difficult thing in life. So raise more, dilute more, because you'll be able to build with peace and build something far better and larger than keeping on worrying about your stake in that business. So raise capital early enough and raise it for a decent run, 3-4 years, ideally, 2-3 years at least, but not for 6 months. Because every 6 months, if you have to go and start raising capital, it's the most humiliating, painful task in life, right? And third is find a co-founder, because building a startup on your own is very difficult. You need people to talk to, you need somebody to bounce off ideas every morning. So you need a co-founder, 1 or 2 at best. Choose your co-founder based only on trust. Only on trust, right? Don't optimize for skill, because skill you can hire, you can pick up, right? It's about, and that's where you find co-founders breaking up, because once you stop trusting each other, right, it becomes very, very difficult every morning to come and worrying about the fact that, is my co-founder going to do something else? So it's completely based on trust, and it's not easy. You must talk to each other. You must tell each other, like, listen, the only thing that's got to remain between us is trust. if you do these three things right, I think if you have an ecosystem, if you raise enough capital, and you've got a founding team that's living there based on trust, you'll win.
I think very, very important points. And like one of my, like I've seen somebody use a very simple analogy that if you can't give access to the company bank account to your co-founder, then that's a problem. If you think,
yeah,
you know,
absolutely, that's
you know,
trust, yeah.
Because you know, you and your co-founder should have, like there should be no challenge in sharing the most important things, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not one person. It's like you,
yeah,
as a team, as a co-founding team.
A lot of times you'll say, my co-founder should be a CTO, which is good, nothing wrong with it, right? But you're choosing that guy based on a skill that you need, right? And you're ignoring the fact that I have to live with him and we got to stay together, build that business together, and if that trust is missing, it'll break. It's high pressure.
Yeah, and I think one interesting thing I have realized is that I spend more waking time with my co-founder than with my wife.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's what happens.
And so I think like that should tell you how much time to invest in finding the right co-founder. Because you know there is no, I mean just like there is like ideally you should not be changing partners very, very fast. So it's an important decision. You know, it's more important than, you know, what your starting roles look like. It's more important than, you know, and I think, for example, I advise people whenever they come to me for advice, which is not often, but how should you split equity? And I tell them, if you are co-founders, then equity is equal.
Correct.
You know, if you're not equal co-founders, then you're not co-founders.
Correct.
Right? You know, then somebody is a founder and everybody else is joining as an early founding team member.
Correct.
Right?
There are a lot of such things that you have to do as with the founding team. Equity splitting, you know, how often will you meet? How, you know, is there a way we can share responsibilities, but then we get back together in the evening, and the co-founders, if they don't fight, it doesn't work, right? So you can't be agreeing all the time, right? But the thing is that, you know, at the end of it, you're like moving on, right?
Yeah.
And you're telling yourself like, listen, this is great. And we're probably, you know, I'm saying this because, you know, without having to brag, actually we are three of us who've been co-founders for donkey's years. And
how did you find your co-founders?
So I was working with one of them in Wipro, I was working with one of them in Planet Asia, so I was that guy who worked with all three. So we worked together. But you know what? For some strange reason, we told ourselves that time that the only thing that will keep us going is that we need to trust each other. And we said this to ourselves way back. I don't know why. Just, you know, some of these things now it just comes and it just happens, and then it becomes a norm, right? Then it becomes something that you can then talk to people about and tell them that if you don't have this, the startup is going to struggle, because then, you know, co-founder, you know, you're not able to trust and do anything. Those startups never work.
And I think I've also realized that environments like these, where a lot of like-minded people, a lot of high energy folks, entrepreneurially inclined people come together, could be one of the most important times to find a co-founder or sort of start building the foundation, because it's not easy to find a co-founder outside. You know, you can't just go on a website and say that, okay, this is a website to find co-founders and we can meet each other. You know, that trust doesn't start. You need a common ground. You need common experiences or shared value systems, which curated networks are able to create. So a bunch of you will try, right? I mean, so a bunch of them will try here also, but a lot of them will end up working in startups with the goal of starting up a few years later. Which I was also explaining outside. Any advice to them as to what sort of roles should they take right after Mesa school? What sort of roles, what sort of people they should be working on? What should they optimize for, so that in the next 3 to 5 years they feel ready and they increase the odds of their success as an entrepreneur?
You know, the first thing I asked Ankit when we were chatting today is that how do you differentiate? What is that line that differentiates between building what all of you are building yourselves to become, right? Employee in a startup or an entrepreneur, right? And he was explaining to me how the lines are, are becoming a little blurred and stuff like that. And I was telling him an employer is always worried that if somebody is coming with a mindset of saying I will start at some point, in which case how long are you going to last there? You know, standard stuff that especially all these HR folks will get worried about, right? The founder may not, get as worried, because the founder thinks that if he's got 1 year of you, then
Yeah.
I think he's got lots of you, right? Because if you work in that mindset, the key thing in, to be an intrapreneur, right? And that's what it's called, right? When you want to work like an entrepreneur in an organization, right? And the only place to do that is a startup. You can never ever do that in a corporate. Trust me. I'm part of a corporate now for the last 4 years. I told myself long back that I'll never ever work in a corporate because I think my mindset had changed. And when I did for a short period between my first 2 startups, I went and did some work for Manipal, where I set up a vocational education college for them, right? It was called India Skills. So they called me and said, "You want to?" Because I was taking a break, right? When that sale happened to Aditya Birla, I went home and I told my wife. So she asked me, "What do you plan to do?" So I said, "What do you think I should do?" So she said, "You're not doing a startup again," because it was a very hard roller coaster, that whole journey, right? It went up and down and up and down, and the family took a lot of pain. And so I agreed with her and took a break for a couple of years and did set up a vocational, education, skill education college for them. And I told the boss there, the guy who was heading it, that listen, I'm going to be, you'll find me very weird because I'm not going to, adhere to. First of all, I'm not going to wear a tie and coat and stuff like that, and please allow me that, right? And I was not trying to be arrogant or anything. It's just that you feel very uncomfortable if you have not done that often, right? I still see the chairman of the Tata Group, and Chandrasekharan, and I think, and keep this between yourselves, I think he probably even has dinner wearing his, because they're so used to it, right? They have to wear a coat and tie and come, and they're happy like that, and there's nothing wrong. Whereas all of us were, we just want a little freedom. So starting with that, right? Always remember, have a coach and ask for it, right? Who's always helping you maneuver in a startup mode while you're working, right? I have a lot of such people in BigBasket. They are like great guys, and these are the guys who really contribute to me, right? In various functions across the board, right? Be it merchandising, buying, the guy who's sitting with farmers. When I see an entrepreneur working, I see the difference, or a mindset, entrepreneur mindset, and I see a difference between a typical guy who will also deliver. There's nothing wrong with it. But this guy will be like, he'll be ideating all the time. He'll be giving you new thoughts. Somebody has to be there to manage that. Somebody has to be there to coach him. Somebody has to be there to control him. Somebody has to be there to get the juice out of him. So typically what organizations do is, when you want an intrapreneur to really nurture and do well in an organization, put a guy who's going to manage him. And managing is not about coming on time and going on time. It's managing his thinking and managing his whole behavior and managing him. So read about this, you'll find most entrepreneurs do well when they have a coach in the organization. And there'll be like one very silent coach, and this is not about somebody who's told you. So what I do is, I have people who actually try and extract the best out of these people. And frankly, such people, if they last 1 year for me, I'm fine. That's what I was asking you, Ankit.
Yeah.
The thinking is that, when you go and join a company, and I'm suggesting that you start even talking to founders about nurturing people like this in your organization, because they're always thinking, kya karna hai next, for the organization also, for yourself also, right? All the time thinking, all the time ideating, all the time creating. So that could actually be quite distracting also, right? For people working with you. Teams could get very distracted. So you must have a coach. You must have somebody whom you're telling that, listen, just keep a watch on me. Because that's how your mindsets will be, right? You're wanting to become an entrepreneur, successful entrepreneur, right? If you want to become an entrepreneur with a very corporate mindset, you will not become an entrepreneur. I can tell you that. It's not about weirdos. It's not about being crazy or a different guy. It's just that you're so bubbly and thinking, and just managing such people becomes tough.
Yeah. No, I think what you said is that if you want to be an entrepreneur later on, it's best for you to work in a startup.
Yeah.
And I think because that gives
lots of learning.
I think because the risk of failure is also high, and as a result, you're almost always operating at the edge. You're always operating in a resource constrained setting. You're always forced to be closer to customers. There is no insulation,
correct,
so to speak. And it's almost impossible to hide inside a startup, because if something breaks, almost like there's a very clear line to trace back to you.
Correct.
Which creates accountability and ownership. So I think we are very, very excited about students here either building today or building in some other startups and building them and then building on them, building by themselves a bit later. I think we've run out of time. Maybe just 2-3 closing questions, sir. To close. Who is your favorite cricketer?
Virat Kohli.
And why?
He's all about passion, right? He's all about passion. Even at this age, you see that guy, right? People tend to believe that passion turning into a little bit arrogance. It's not, right? It's true passion. One, he's not too worried about whether captaincy comes, captaincy goes away. Of course, he took a little pain when this politics and all starts coming in, people like this take a little pain, but that's fine. That's part of life, right? It has you have to go with it. He just decided that if I have to just contribute for the team, then that's my role, and I don't have to be a captain to be doing that. And everything he does, right, is basically built for the country. It's built for the team. And he just throws so much of passion into it.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to He's passionate, but he's unapologetic about it.
Yeah,
almost like.
Yeah, actually the line is he tends to. A lot of people call him arrogant. I don't see arrogance there, right? I mean, arrogance, manifests in different forms, right? But it's just the fact that, and that's why you succeed, right? And just success has been there. There are patches that you will go through, and that's true with every sportsman. The other guy very close to him is Dhoni.
I think very similar traits.
The most silent winner, right? Different traits, right? This guy is like yelling and screaming and animated all the time, and that man is like standing there. You can't even, no expression. But amazing leader.
No, so, but this was a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for making
time. And all
time.
the very best, folks.
Thank you so much.
Just do well.